Alright, folks, welcome back. Hoot. Remember, Mother Paula's their groundbreaking ceremony, and Mullet Fingers has buried himself in the dirt, and his head sticking out. That's where we're at. That's a bit shocking to everybody. That's not what I was expecting either. So, let's see how this goes. Wouldn't try that, Beatrice's stepbrother warned through clenched jaws. Really, and why not? Chuck Muckle said. That's where they're going to try to pull him out of the ground. The boy smiled. Roy, do me a favor. Check out what's in the bucket. Roy was happy to oblige. What do you see? The boy asked. Cottonmouth moccasins, Roy replied. How many? 9 or 10. They look happy, Roy? Not really. What do you think's going to happen if I tip that thing over? With his tongue, Mullet Fingers displayed the string that connected him to the bucket. Somebody could get hurt pretty bad, Roy said, playing along. He had been mildly surprised, though relieved to see that the reptiles in the bucket were made of rubber. Mr. Muckle stewed. This is ridiculous, Mr. Brannett. Do what I told you. Get that kid out of my sight. The foreman backed. No, not me. I don't much care for snakes. Really? Then you're fired. Once again, the vice president turned to confront Officer Delinko. Make yourself useful. Shoot the things. No, sir, not around all these people. It's too dangerous. The policeman approached the boy and dropped to one knee. How'd you get here? He asked. Hopped the fence last night, then I hid under the backhoe, the boy said. You walked right past me about 5 times. You're the one who painted my patrol car last week. No comment. And ran away from the hospital? Double no comment, the boy said. And hung your green shirt on my antenna. Man, you don't understand. The owl's got no chance against these machines. I do understand. I honestly do, Officer Delinko said. One more question. You serious about the cottonmouths? Serious as a heart attack. Can I have a look in the bucket? The boy's eyes flickered. It's your funeral, he said. Roy whispered to Beatrice. We've got to do something quick. Those snakes aren't real. Great. As the policeman approached the tin bucket, Beatrice shouted, Don't do it. He might get bit. Officer Delinko didn't flinch. He peeked over the rim for what seemed to Roy and Beatrice like an eternity. Jig's up, Roy thought glumly. No way he won't notice they're fake. Yet the patrolman didn't say a word as he backed away from the bucket. Well, Mr. Muckle demanded, what do we do? Kids, for real. If I were you, I'd negotiate, said Officer Delinko. Huh, I don't negotiate with juvenile delinquents. With a snarl, Chuck Muckle snatched the gold-painted shovel from Councilman Grady's hands and charged toward the bucket. Don't, hollered the boy in the owl hole, spitting the string. But the man from Mother Paula's was unstoppable. With a wild swing of the shovel, he knocked over the bucket and commenced flailing and hacking at the snakes in a blind slobber in fury. He didn't stop until they were in pieces. Little rubber pieces. Exhausted, Chuck Muckle leaned over and squinted at the mutilated toy snakes. His expression reflected both disbelief and humiliation. What in the world, he wheezed. During the violent attack on the cottonmouths, the crowd had oohed and awed. Now the only sounds to be heard were the click, click, click of the news photographer's camera and the panting of Mother Paula's vice president. Hey, them snakes are fake, Curly piped. They ain't even real. Roy leaned toward Beatrice and whispered, Another Einstein. Chuck Muckle pivoted in slow motion. Ominously, he pointed the blade of the shovel at the boy in the burrow. You, he bellowed, stalking forward. Roy jumped in front of him. Out of my way, kid, Chuck Muckle said. I don't have time for any more of your nonsense. Move it now. It was clear that Mother Paula's big shot had totally lost his cool, and possibly his marbles. What are you doing? Roy asked, knowing he probably wouldn't get a calm, patient answer. I say get out of my way. I'm going to dig that little twerp out of that ground myself. Beatrice leaped, darted forward, and stood next to Roy, taking his right hand. An anxious murmur swept through the crowd. That's real cute. Like Romeo and Juliet, Chuck Muckle taunted. He dropped his voice and said, Game over, kiddies. On the count of 3, I'm going to start using this shovel. Or better, how about I get the baldy over here to crank up the bulldozer? The foreman scowled. Thought you said I was fired. Out of nowhere, somebody grabbed Roy's left hand. It was Garrett, the skateboard tucked under one arm. 3 of the skateboarding homies were lined up beside him. What are you guys doing? Roy said. Skipping school, Garrett replied merrily. But dude, this looks like way more fun. Roy turned to see that Beatrice had been joined by the entire soccer team, linking arms in a silent chain. They were tall, strong girls who weren't the least bit intimidated by Chuck Muckle's blustery threats. Chuck Muckle realized it too. Stop this foolishness right now, he begged. There is no need for an ugly mob scene. Roy watched in wonderment as more and more kids slipped out of the crowd and began joining hands, forming a human barricade around Beatrice's self-buried stepbrother. None of the parents made a move to stop them. The TV cameraman announced that the demonstration was being broadcast live on the noon news, while the photographer from the paper swooped in for close-ups of Mr. Muckle, looking drained, defeated, and suddenly very old. He braced himself on the ceremonial shovel as if it were a cane. "Didn't any of you people hear me?" he rasped. "This event is over, done. You can all go home now." The mayor, Councilman Grandy, and the man from the Chamber of Commerce stealthily retreated to their limousine while Leroy Brannett plodded off to his trailer in search of a cold drink. Officer Delinko leaned against the fence, writing up a report. Roy was in an eerie yet tranquil daze. Some girl started singing a famous old folk song called "This Land Is Your Land." It was Beatrice, of all people, and her voice was surprisingly lovely and soft. Before long, the other kids were singing along too. Roy shut his eyes and felt like he was floating on the sunny slope of a cloud. "Excuse me, hotshot. Got room for one more?" Roy blinked, opened his eyes, and broke into a grin. "Yes, ma'am," he said. Mother Paula stepped between him and Garrett to join the circle. Her voice was gravelly, but she could carry a tune just fine. The demonstration went on for another hour. 2 other TV crews showed up, along with a couple of extra Coconut Cove police cruisers summoned by Officer Delinko. Chuck Muckle exhorted the newly arrived lawmen to arrest the protesters for trespassing, truancy, and disturbing the peace. The suggestion was firmly rejected. A sergeant informed Mr. Muckle that handcuffing a bunch of middle school kids wouldn't be good for the public safety department's image. The situation remained fairly stable until the flamboyant arrival of Lana Leap, who spotted her son on TV news. She was all dressed up like she'd been invited to a party, and she wasn't the least bit shy about sticking her nose in front of the cameras. Roy overheard her tell a reporter how proud she was of her boy for risking his freedom to save the poor helpless owls. "He's my brave little champion," Lana crowned obnoxiously. With a phony squeal of affection, she charged toward the wall of humanity that encircled her son. Beatrice ordered everyone to lock arms, blocking Lana's path. There was one hairy moment when Lana and her stepdaughter stood glowering at each other, eye to eye, as if they were about to tangle. Garrett broke the standoff with a phenomenal fake fart that sent Lana reeling back in horror. Roy nudged Beatrice. "Look up there." Overhead, a small dusky-colored bird was flying in marvelous, darting, and daring corkscrews. Roy and Beatrice watched in delight as it banked lower and lower, finishing with a radical dive toward the burrow at the center of the circle. Everybody whirled to see that the bird had landed. All of a sudden, the singing stopped. There was Mullet Fingers trying not to giggle. The daredevil owl perched calmly on the crown of his head. "Don't worry, little guy," the boy said. "You're safe for now." Napoleon, Chapter 21. Napoleon Bridger. Roy read the name aloud. "It's certainly colorful," his mother remarked. They were at the breakfast table, Mrs. Eberhardt carefully clipping articles and photographs from the morning newspaper. The front page featured a picture of Roy, Beatrice, and Mother Paula clasping hands in a circle at a demonstration. The head of Beatrice's stepbrother could be seen in the background, looking very much like a fallen coconut with a blonde toupee. The caption beneath the photograph revealed Mother Paula as an actress and foreign beauty queen named Kimberly Lou Dixon. Beatrice's stepbrother was identified as Napoleon Bridger Leap. Napoleon. Nice. "Is he back home now?" Roy's mother asked. "I don't know if he'd call it that," Roy said, "but he's back with his mom and stepfather." At the scene of the student protest, Lana Leap had pitched a weepy, spluttering fit and demanded to be reunited with her son. Not knowing any better, a police officer had led her out of the crowd toward Mullet Fingers, spooking the bald little owl away from the boy. "My champ, my brave little hero," Lana had swooned for the cameras as he wiggled out of the burrow. Roy and Beatrice had watched in helpless disgust as she locked Mullet Fingers in a smothering, melodramatic hug. Mrs. Eberhardt clipped out the newspaper photo of Lana posing with the boy, who looked extremely uncomfortable. "Well, maybe things will be better between the two of them," Roy's mother said hopefully. "No, Mom, she just wanted to be on TV." Roy reached for his backpack. "I'd better get going." "Your father wants to see you before school." "Oh?" Mr. Eberhardt had worked late the previous night, and Roy had already gone to sleep by the time he got home. "Is he mad?" Roy asked his mother. "I don't think so. Mad about what?" Roy pointed at the paper, checkerboarded with scissor holes. "About what happened yesterday, about what me and Beatrice did." "Honey, you didn't break any laws. You didn't hurt anybody," Mrs. Eberhardt said. "All you did was speak out for what you believed was right. Your dad respects that." Roy knew that respects wasn't necessarily the same thing as agrees with. He had a feeling his father was sympathetic on the owl issue, but Mr. Eberhardt had never come out and said so. "Mom, is Mother Paula still going to build the pancake house?" "I don't know, Roy. Apparently this Mr. Muckle fellow lost his temper and tried to strangle a reporter when she asked the same question." "No way." Roy and Beatrice had left before the impromptu press conference was over. Mrs. Eberhart held up the clipping. "It says so right here." Roy couldn't believe how much space the newspaper had devoted to the owl protest. It must have been the biggest story to hit Coconut Cove since the last hurricane. His mother said, "The phone started ringing at 6 this morning. Your dad made me take it off the hook." "I'm sorry, Mom." "Don't be silly. I'm making a whole scrapbook, honey. Something to show your children and grandchildren." "I'd rather show them the owls," Roy thought, "if there are any left by then." "Roy," it was his father calling to him from the den, "could you please get the door?" A thin young woman in a short-cropped black hair greeted Roy on the front steps. She was armed with a spiral notebook and a ballpoint pen. "Hi, I'm from the Gazette," she announced. "Thanks, but we've already got a subscription." The woman laughed. "Oh, I don't sell the newspaper. I write it." She extended a hand. "Kelly Colfax." On her neck, Roy noticed several bluish finger-sized marks that resembled the bruises that Dana Matherson had left on him. Roy figured that Kelly Colfax was the reporter whom Chuck Muckle had tried to choke. "I'll get my father," he said. "That's not necessary. It's you I wanted to speak with," she said. "You are Roy Eberhart, right?" Roy felt trapped. He didn't want to act rude, but he certainly didn't want to say anything that might cause more trouble for Mullet Fingers. Kelly Colfax began firing questions. "How'd you get involved in the demonstration? Are you friends with Napoleon Bridger Leap? Were you two involved in the vandalism incidents in Mother Paula's property? Do you like pancakes? What kind of pancakes?" Roy's head was whirling, and finally he broke and said, "Look, I just went there to stand up for the owls, and that's all." As the reporter jotted down Roy's words, the door swung open, and there stood Mr. Eberhart, shaved, showered, and neatly dressed in one of his gray suits. "Excuse me, ma'am. I have a word. Can I have a word with my son?" I think that's where we'll stop. Page 278. Getting ready, actually 279, at the very top. We'll pick up there tomorrow, and there is a slight chance we might finish this baby up. So, cool. I bet we will. That's what we'll pick up tomorrow. Hope you guys have a great day, and hope you've enjoyed this. About ready to wrap it up. Have a good one.